Bring in show music, please.
Hi, I'm CNBC producer Katie Kramer. Today on Squawk Pod. United Airlines has announced its first share buyback since before the pandemic, $1.5 billion. But Flight Attendants Union President Sara Nelson says some of that money belongs to her colleagues.
As the airline is making more money, there should be more to share with United flight attendants.
Plus, United CEO Scott Kirby on the contract negotiations, driving a wedge between the airline and its staff.
They deserve and they are going to get an industry-leading contract.
And Qualcomm reportedly waiting until after the U.S. election to pursue an Intel acquisition.
It's possible that this deal actually has a better chance in a Harris administration, oddly enough to me.
Really?
Because, yes.
Those stories, plus Tom Brady, your newest NFL owner, and Donald Trump talks the economy.
Serenity now.
It's Wednesday, October 16th, 2024. Squawk Pod begins right now.
Stand Becky by in 3, 2, 1. Cue it, please.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Squawk Box right here on CNBC. We are live from the NASDAQ market site in Times Square. I'm Becky Quick, along with Joe Kernen and Andrew Ross Sorkin. And we're continuing to keep an eye on crude oil. This is coming at $70.64. So month to date, we're still up, but you can see that drop that we've experienced over the last several days as people wonder what Israel would do in response to Iran.
Can we just, about Israel, what are we thinking now about? You think they wait to the? See, I don't think they're going to wait
till the election. No, I don't. But you don't know if there are going to be multiple.
And we're talking about oil.
Multiple reactions, or multiple strikes that they might do.
Did Netanyahu deny the Washington Post leak from the Biden administration that they weren't going to do?
Well, it sounded like, hey, look, we'll do what we want to do. We'll decide.
Yeah, I don't think it was a denial. I think it was just.
Was that not a true leak? Was that a Biden administration leak? That like it's like.
Well, it's a leak from what they were.
Really? That's, have they agreed to not do nuclear and energy facilities?
I don't think we know.
We don't know. Then I saw that it's imminent and that everything's on the table. I saw that conjecture again. But I think it matters, doesn't it? Are we on the cusp of some... If Israel decided to do the nuclear facilities, that's going to be a news story.
Well, that's why we keep talking about the repercussions of that, and therefore
it's going to be a news story that we're going to be. It's going to take over the entire news cycle. It would even supplant some of the election coverage, I would think.
Not only would it supplant it,
but add and change it and add to it.
Maybe.
Okay, so we don't know. So you don't know.
I don't
and
think
you
we
can't
knew,
tell me.
Look, I don't think we know more than we knew before.
You didn't talk to Bibi.
I didn't talk to Bibi. I didn't talk to Biden. I don't know the answer. Sorry. I'll make some phone calls during the show.
When are we going to break?
So we can make the phone calls.
It's midday over there.
Meantime, United Airlines reported earnings of $3.33 per share. It beat estimates of $3.17. Revenue also beat expectations. Current quarter estimates topping analyst forecasts. United saying that it's starting now a $1.5 billion share buyback. It's first since before the COVID-19 pandemic, when airlines received more than $50 billion in government aid that at the time prohibited buybacks and dividends. Meantime, we should tell you that Southwest announced a $2.5 billion buyback program itself last month. Now, in a statement, Sara Nelson, who's the president of the Flight Attendants Union that represents crews at United, including also Spirit, Alaska, and some others, said that money United just promised Wall Street belongs to flight attendants who worked throughout the pandemic and during this taxing recovery for all of us on the front lines. And Sarah's going to join us later this hour. We're going to talk to her about all of this.
I love our producer, and I love you. I love that I have this article. I got to, or this read. Serenity now. Former President Trump did a really good interview yesterday, all about the economy.
Yeah?
Yeah. And I was watching it, and I was like, yeah, that was my first question for Friday about independence of the Federal Reserve, right? You always want interest rates lower because you're a real estate guy. You're gonna be great for inflation, but you're not gonna let the Fed do what it needs. Everything, all the wires I was seeing coming out were like, yeah, I might have asked that. Yeah, we were gonna ask that. Yeah, instead it was Bloomberg. No problem. Well, whatever you guys want. Former President Trump defended his plans to overhaul the U.S. economy through dramatic tariff increases and more direct consultation with the Federal Reserve. In an interview yesterday at the Economic Club of Chicago with Bloomberg, Trump repeatedly dismissed predictions by economists that his policies would have a net negative impact on the economy and pass costs on to consumers.
The higher the tariff, the more likely it is that the company will come into the United States and build a factory in the United States so it doesn't have to pay the tariff.
That will take many
No,
that
it'll go quickly.
years.
In fact, I'll tell you, there's another theory is that the tariff, you make it so high, so horrible, so obnoxious that they'll come right away.
Visible. Trump said he would lower taxes further for companies that make products in the U.S. Tonight we have Bret Baier.
Interviewing Kamala Harris.
And we have a town hall with someone named Harris, first name, Harris Faulkner, on women's issues with Donald J. Trump, with former President Trump. So, and I don't know, in the next 20 days, we shall see. We shall see how many, how many rallies versus media events are on the docket. I wonder what Kamala Harris, what Vice President Harris does. This is opening you would think, the door to a lot of different things. I think we heard yesterday probably the Joe Rogan idea was off the table.
Look, the next 20 days, it's a local campaign. That's the thing.
So there won't be any media then?
Oh, it might be it might be a lot of local media. It might be a couple big national media thrown into the middle of it. But I'm just saying, you are running these. They've decided. Both of these guys have decided that they're running local campaigns in basically 5 or 7 states. That's the business.
Trump was asked yesterday which states he would be watching on election night. He said Pennsylvania, and I think it was Wisconsin was the second that he'd be watching, but definitely Pennsylvania. We know that that's 19 electoral votes, and a pretty important one for either of them, because you don't win on popular vote. You
the
win
betting
on the
odds
college.
have exploded for Trump, even on if you put them all together. But Polymarket, which people might like it or not, 59.8 right now. But a Marist poll was released, I think, late yesterday. National 5-point lead. 5-point lead for Harris.
Right.
So
that's why I'm not sure which poll you're supposed to look at. I was thinking betting polls.
This is not a poll.
But I was thinking for a while. I've been thinking betting markets should be more accurate. Then I was going back and looking really at 22 and how actually inaccurate the betting markets were.
In the swing states, Andrew, and Georgia 63-36 Trump. Michigan 53-46. Nevada, which flipped, 50-49. Pennsylvania, 56-43 Trump. Wisconsin.
You're looking at betting markets or polls?
That's just Polymarket.
Right.
That's just the bets.
Why don't you pull up the DJT story that we're going to do in just a moment, because this is pretty important too. And
it finally went down.
It did, but
after,
the volatility.
After trading at like 33, and Bitcoin was almost back to 70,000 too.
Right. I don't know if they can move that up. There it is, Andrew. This is.
Yeah, we can talk about this because Trump media pulling back yesterday. This after it had been climbing. We were talking about it when it was falling. Now when it's rising, it was briefly halted, we should say, due to volatility during yesterday's session, following a sudden 6% plunge in the price. It continued to slide after trading resumed, closing lower by nearly 10%. Hard to really understand exactly what's leading the stock either way anymore. Yesterday was the highest volume day for the stock since it started publicly trading on the NASDAQ in late March. It is still up 60% in the last month. Some people seem to think it's an indicator of whether he becomes the president or not. Other people think it's not related to anything. I presented without commentary because it's sort of hard to
It's hard to explain when the moves are that volatile in one day and when the volume is that high.
Well, what did it mean when it was 12, down from 50, but then it has doubled at 13?
Well, there were questions about whether he would sell some of his stake when
there was,
back in September,
or
when he was,
whenever the lockup, anyone would sell.
So there were a lot of questions around that, but it's been even more volume than we've ever seen.
So we got a 2-week Bitcoin or a monthly Bitcoin. I think it's
above 67.
Yeah, 67. So you can see that. That has been steadily. It was 59.
Right, there's a longer term.
It was 59 2 weeks ago.
And NFL owners approving former quarterback Tom Brady as a minority owner of the league's Las Vegas Raiders. The 7-time Super Bowl champion bought a roughly 10% stake in the team with his business partner, Knighthead Capital founder Tom Wagner. People familiar with the negotiations say Brady and Wagner are buying into the Raiders at about a $3.5 billion valuation with an equity investment of about $220 million as part of that partnership. The two men also have to pay a tax that will be split among the league's 31 other owners.
But interestingly, he's allowed to cover the game. This is fascinating to me. He's allowed to cover a Raiders game, but he's not allowed to talk to the players or the coaches or to go inside the locker room or certain other things. So they've put a whole sort of set of restrictions on sort of what he can do as a member of the Fox media team that covers it because he's owning.
My guess is they would like him as an owner, the NFL. And obviously Fox would like him as a commentator.
I just saw one piece in one of the sports pages that Tom finally admitted that it was a fumble. I guess there was something against the Raiders where they ended up saying that it was a forward pass, and when in fact his hand was not. I don't know, but that there's people that love, just sports memorabilia. Just remember that incident with the Raiders. But it's kind of, I'd like to own a team, sort of. That's so 5% of 220. Is what he's putting up.
Well, who knows? It's a partnership.
No,
they didn't
half of 220, so 110.
Well, they didn't necessarily say it was half and half. There's a partnership.
No, they did say 5. I saw 5%.
Right, I saw 5% too.
That, Tom Brady, he's getting 5%, which is kind of cool. I guess he can't bet on.
No.
Can't bet against the Raiders or on the Raiders.
Cannot bet on any team in the NFL. I don't believe you're allowed.
On any. Yeah. Wow, that would be a big problem for me.
Yeah, that'd be the biggest problem.
Big
other than that, you'd be an owner.
Yeah. Other than that, it could be an owner.
Just get some season tickets.
Right. That would be a stretch. That would be a stretch. Which team?
You can choose.
No. I don't
Jets.
Yeah.
Get a green
I do.
tie on.
No, because it's Earth Day, isn't it? No, it's not Earth Day. I was confused. Every day for me is Earth Day. Every day. In fact, I've been trying to only breathe half as many breaths.
We appreciate it.
Today. So
Cheese will be next.
Coming up, how a massive buyback plan at United Airlines further inflamed a point of contention between the airline and its flight attendants. They've been fighting for a better contract. Sara Nelson, leader of the Flight Attendants Union, explains her frustration.
Instead, they are sending this money to Wall Street rather than investing in the frontline workers who are with the passengers more than anyone else.
Plus, we talk to United CEO Scott Kirby.
We're working with them. At their request, we're in federal mediation. We're going to get there. They deserve, and they're going to get an industry-leading contract.
And that's all right after this break. Welcome back to Squawk Pod. United Airlines launching a $1.5 billion share buyback program. It's first since the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, you may remember at that time when travelers everywhere stayed home, airlines received more than $50 billion in government aid. Now, the catch for that aid, it prohibited buybacks and dividends. In announcing the buyback, United CEO Scott Kirby praised the airline's change to unproductive flying plans this summer, which supercharged revenue. He called it an inflection point. The president of the Flight Attendants Union that represents crews at a number of airlines says that money, that $1.5 billion that United is currently blessed with, well, they say it belongs to frontline workers. Sara Nelson, president of the Association of Flight Attendants International, joined our TV broadcast this morning. Becky Quick takes things from here.
And Sara, this is a complicated issue. I want to make sure our viewers understand it. So we should put this in the backdrop that United Airlines flight attendants authorized a strike last month if they cannot reach a negotiation with the company over where you stand on your next contract. So let's put it in that backdrop. You're upset because you don't have a contract right now, and they're offering to buy back shares, correct?
Yes, Becky. And as you know, this goes back to 2020 when we did get that payroll support program that included the ban on stock buybacks and dividends and a cap on executive compensation. And the workers were on the front lines saving the airline and keeping it going. And we saved the airline both with that government plan, but also with our work. And we were supposed to be in negotiations then. So negotiations are 3 years delayed at this point. We're the last employee group without a contract. And Scott Kirby seems to be trying to echo the words of Herb Kelleher in his messages to employees. But it's hypocritical and really dishonest because he's not sending decision makers to the table. I have done dozens of contract negotiations, and I know what it looks like when a company actually wants to work honestly with you to get improvements to workers. And that is not what's happening at United Airlines. And instead, they are sending this money to Wall Street rather than investing in the frontline workers who are with the passengers more than anyone else.
Okay, so you all are looking for things, a double-digit pay increase of 28% plus 4% a year after that. You're looking for better retirement pay, more flexibility with schedules. You're looking for retroactive pay for time negotiating, time for long waits being paid on flight, in between flights, and pay for time when the plane is actually boarding, which I have to say I'm very surprised that that is not part of the pay that you receive. That seems like a significant amount of time. However, United Airlines, I believe, has offered to match the American Airlines deal that was ratified last month by the flight attendants, and that includes a lot of those issues: a 20.5% pay raise, retroactive pay for time negotiating, a pay for boarding time. What's wrong with the deal that American Airlines flight attendants accepted?
The American Airlines flight attendants did accept a contract that sets part of the new standard for the industry. And the standard is being set at Southwest, at American, at Alaska with the TA. It hasn't been ratified yet, but that has been locked in with agreements from management. And that is not what United Airlines is doing. They're still looking for concessions in healthcare. They're looking for concessions in scheduling. No one else, pilots, machinists, anyone across the industry has accepted concessions. That's not what this is. And so they continue to delay the negotiations with these requests for concessions. The pay increases, of course, are going to be at that level. We know that already. There is a framework for this contract. And if they get to the table and work with us earnestly, get the ridiculous concessions off the table that is not in place for anyone else, we can reach an agreement very quickly. But they are not. Let me just
clarify, because I've read a lot of reports trying to figure out what the actual story is. Have they agreed to match everything with the American Airlines flight attendants, or they have offered to match with concessions, or they have agreed to match but you want concessions? Which is it?
They have not agreed to match on all of the compensation. They have not agreed to match for the time on the ground. They have not agreed to match with retroactive pay. None of that. That
American did agree to? I just want to make sure this is an apples to apples comparison. That American Airlines did agree to.
American got all of those things and without concessions. And so this is nowhere, what they are doing at the table right now is nowhere near what the American Airlines flight attendants reached. And let's also recognize, too, that United Airlines is in a much better financial position than American Airlines is. They have more money to give to the flight attendants, and the flight attendants have been waiting a very long time for this. So this is not that hard. They're not going to completely match American, but they're not even doing that right now. And the concessions that they have on the table are just a delay tactic, in addition to the fact that they're sending very low-level managers, so they're not showing any interest in actually reaching a deal.
Okay, my understanding is that the buyback of shares, United has said that this is to buy back shares that were originally issued to the U.S. Treasury under the pandemic-era CARES Act and payroll support program that currently represents about 7% of the airline's current market cap. So far, they've only bought back about 2 million of the 6.4 million warrants that were issued. And in that case, they'd actually be buying back shares to pay back the U.S. taxpayer, not Wall Street.
So they're doing that, but that is over and above what they're doing with the $1.5 billion in this stock buyback program. Those are two separate things. Other airlines have done that. They've also been dishonest about saying that Alaska has given returns to shareholders. It's in that same bucket that you're talking about, Becky, that's related to those warrants. Delta Airlines has given dividends, and they should. They've made more money than anyone else, and they should be rewarding those shareholders with those dividends. The stock buybacks
the stock buybacks reward shareholders in the same way, and it's more tax efficient, actually. If you're a big shareholder, you get paid back instead of getting dividends that are taxed. You can own a larger portion of the company by having those stock buybacks come through. So if you're in favor of dividends, I don't understand the problem with the stock buyback.
The problem is, Becky, is that there was an agreement that they would not give these stock buybacks across the industry until they reinvested in the operation. As you know, there were all the operational meltdowns that really disserviced passengers, and until they reinvested in the employees and finished these negotiations. Because across the industry, as we hit the pandemic, there were supposed to be negotiations after 20 years of austerity following 9/11 with all of the bankruptcies. then the consolidation in the industry. This was the first opportunity for employees to move forward. And United Airlines flight attendants are one of the last groups standing, waiting for those improvements that are long overdue. And so these stock buybacks were not supposed to go anywhere near to Wall Street until all of these contracts are resolved. They're going back on what they agreed to do.
The idea of a strike, I know it has to come after the mediation that you're in right now is ended and then a 30-day cooling off period, but it does indicate that you all could go on strike right around the Thanksgiving holidays. Just asking, as somebody who's bought a United flight for my daughter to come home from college, is that the case? Do I need to worry about that at this point? Do other travelers need to worry about what's going to happen at the holidays?
We don't have a deadline right now, Becky, so I can't say that for sure, but we are in the final stages of negotiations here. And that is up to the government, and the flight attendants clearly are ready to do what we need to do. I think that a strike is a very, very important part of the collective bargaining process. And the last thing we want to do is go on strike. What we want to do is encourage United Airlines to reach an agreement with us. And right now they are showing no interest in doing that. That's the biggest problem here, Becky. They're not getting to the table and seriously talking with us about reaching an agreement.
Sarah, they've been trying to wrap me for a couple of minutes. I really have to go, but a very quick last question, because we have Scott Kirby coming up later this morning, the CEO. If they were to offer to match everything that American Airlines has offered that the flight attendants signed off on last month, would you accept that offer?
Look, the flight attendants at United have a different contract, and so there will be some different things in the contract, but they're not even meeting that standard right now. So let's get serious and talk about that standard and what flight attendants at United deserve, because as the airline is making more money, there should be more to share with United flight attendants.
Sarah, thanks for your time.
Thank you. Thank you, Becky.
Shortly after that conversation, Becky spoke directly to United Airlines CEO Scott Kirby and asked him about negotiations with the frustrated crew of flight attendants.
Hey, Scott, we had Sara Nelson on from the Flight Attendants Union earlier this morning. Obviously, they are upset. They have authorized a strike, the flight attendants at United, if they can't reach an agreement with you on the contract negotiations. Just wonder what the latest is with those contract negotiations. I tried to ask Sara if they would accept the offer that American Airlines flight attendants had accepted. I'm still confused as to whether or not you've actually put that same offer on the table or not.
Well, I think our flight attendants are doing a phenomenal job. They're the best in the industry. They're the best in the world. I can see it in our customer scores. A lot of the improvement at United, I tell the flight attendants that they're the face of United Airlines, and they're doing a great job, and they deserve and they are going to get an industry-leading contract. And so we're working with them. At their request, we're in federal mediation. We're going to get there. They deserve, and they're going to get an industry-leading contract.
Is this a situation that customers should be worried about? Because they could strike, apparently, as early as maybe Thanksgiving holidays.
That's absolutely incorrect. They can't. We're under a federal process where the federal government would have to release us from mediation, and this was at their request. And the mediators we're continuing to meet with. Yeah, and so there's no imminent risk of any action like that.
Next on Squawk Pod.
We could have this argument every day about who you should let manage the private sector, and I think you let the private sector manage the private sector.
Who will make the world's chips and where? Qualcomm's election contingent decision on maybe acquiring Intel, China's concerns about Intel, and so much more. Right after this. This is Squawk Pod.
3, 2, 1, up and Andrew, cue.
Watching Squawk Box on CNBC. I'm Andrew Sorkin, along with Joe Kernen and Becky Quick. We got a lot going on this morning. Qualcomm likely now, apparently, to wait until after the U.S. presidential election before deciding if it wants to go forward and pursue an offer to try to buy Intel. It's according to a new Bloomberg report that said that Qualcomm wants greater clarity on the new occupant of the White House and potential impact on the antitrust landscape, and also America's relationship with China. China, of course, key market for both companies. Qualcomm reportedly made informal inquiries with regulators in China last month about all of this, the same month it made a preliminary approach to Intel on a possible takeover. Now, separately, Reuters reported just in the last hour that Chinese regulators say Intel products sold in that country should be subject to a security review. China claiming the U.S. chipmaker has constantly harmed China's national security and interests. You're seeing the tit for tat already in many of the cases like this. As of last year, 27%, this is important, of Intel's revenue came from China. The move could be similar to what we saw last year when Beijing targeted Micron. It barred key domestic companies from buying its products. This after they claiming rather, I should say, that they failed a network security review. So a lot of questions. And I think implied in this news is that if former President Trump becomes a president, maybe they pursue a deal like this. Maybe, but maybe not. It's sort of hard for me
That was my guess.
Sort of a jump ball. But then there's part of me that thinks that actually, if former President Trump becomes the president, he's going to slap all these tariffs on China and everybody else. And therefore, China is going, if they're already at the tit for tat, that would just escalate itself. So it's very hard to understand what the sort of thought process becomes.
I read it as they must be waiting because they don't think a deal like that would get through a Harris administration. But you're right. When it gets to tit for tat, this would be negotiations. Although Trump did say that just in the last week that the tariffs are something that would be a negotiating tool.
But this may be, I was going to say, it's possible that this deal actually has a better chance in a Harris administration. Oddly enough to me.
Really?
Because the other piece of this is, and Gino Raimondo and the Commerce Department, who's been handing out all this money to Intel, they desperately need Intel to work. They're invested in Intel. We as taxpayers, I don't think we even appreciate it. We're invested.
They haven't gotten all of the money yet.
They haven't got the money yet, but in terms of just the optics of it, if somehow Intel is not able to pull this off or do something on their own, there's going to be hell to pay. That is going to be its own political football.
I think it'll be a big deal
like
if
Solyndra.
Money is lost. Yeah.
So I don't know.
I mean, by definition, it's probably not going to work. By definition, the government cannot figure out, should not be in the business picking winners and losers, especially in technology. They can do fund some of the National Science Foundation work and some of the early research, but then you got to pass the baton at this point.
So here's the question.
Yeah.
What would you do? Seriously, on the chip front, if you
bring it
decide
back
in
here?
a post-COVID world that you need to have chips manufactured here in the United States because it's a national security issue, what would you do?
I probably would do a carrot and stick type thing.
That looks like what?
Tax incentives.
I'm not sure exactly what it would look like, but I trust the private sector.
No, but so Intel doesn't, let's just stipulate.
No, I
Intel
trust that
doesn't
the
have
private
enough money
sector
to
has a better, no, I don't think, I definitely would not pick which companies to try to make bets on.
The problem has been that, remember at the time, everybody who was looking to build a plant was considering us, was considering Germany because of the huge incentives they were offering. You get cheaper labor in other countries, so how do you make it do here?
Right, it would start with keeping the corporate tax rate low. Obviously, we had Joe Woke on again yesterday.
But that's not, we've had a low tax rate, and that's not getting people to build.
We haven't had a low tax rate forever. We had it, and people are still trying to raise it from where it is.
But nobody's building foundries or not as a function
over 35 years
of the tax rate.
Yeah, yes, they are.
No.
Yes, they are.
The reason we are not building foundries in this country is because we have decided that there is, frankly, not a huge margin in those businesses.
In the commodity type chips, but we've led in all the intellectual property.
Correct, but in terms of the actual manufacturing components of building a foundry, the huge investments it takes to do that.
Maybe that just.
And now you're saying
maybe it doesn't need to be with our
Taiwan.
It could be in India. It could be in other parts of the world, perhaps. The commodity components. I think the private sector would figure it out. I'm almost sure that the government isn't going to be able to figure it out. I mean, I'll take my chances.
It was launched as a national defense issue, and remember, all of this happened during COVID when the supply chain fell apart. When we started wondering if we should
Well, it wasn't just supply chain. It's it came out of that country, COVID, and we're dependent on getting chips.
And by the way, we're talking Taiwan.
The export from China wasn't chips; it was COVID.
Right. Well, we're talking Taiwan. We're so dependent on Taiwan, and I think we started looking at every choke point for all kinds of important industries, which we still keep finding out about today with Baxter Industries, where you can't get IVs because of Hurricane Helene knocking out that plant in North Carolina, where we get 60% of our IV fluids for the nation.
Even more important, this whole, whatever you want to call it, this EV transition, you've got the government's fingerprints all over it. And you can see how well that's going.
Look, I'm not saying it's all working.
And I don't know how you do it incentive-wise. I don't know. I just was reading that it's not a transition. It's an addition. We're not doing less of the fossil fuels. We're just trying to add something. Coal demand is going to be even higher in 10 years than it is now.
I am not here to defend
industrial
this administration
policy?
or this. First of all, there's industrial policy going on both parties now. If we watch
I know, and it's all bad.
But the question to me, as a sort of debate about ideas, is what is the right idea? If you decide that you believe that you need to have these chips manufactured in the U.S.,
what is it
exactly that you're going to do that's going to make that happen?
This is an argument we
and
could
just
have
lower taxes broadly is not the answer, I would argue, because it hasn't been the answer.
Well, we could have this argument every day about who you should let manage the private sector, and I think you let the private sector manage the private sector.
This conversation's not going
and
away.
It's not.
It's one we're coming back to again and again. But it's going
away
right now.
You don't want to talk about the EV
because
transition
we're going to a break.
The government has screwed up the EV transition, so it's so much at this point. I wouldn't want to talk about that either.
That is Squawk Pod for today. Thanks for listening. Squawk Box is hosted by Joe Kernen, Becky Quick, and Andrew Ross Sorkin. Tune in weekday mornings on CNBC at 6 Eastern and get the best of our show right into your ears when you follow Squawk Pod, wherever you get your podcasts. We'll meet you right back here tomorrow.
We are clear. Thanks, guys.